The story is told that J.J. Rawlings, after Professor Mills had been elected in 2008, and he had been elected with the support of Rawlings, we all remember that. Rawlings had been very instrumental in the conduct of the elections in 2008. We all remember that. J.J. Rawlings had been unhappy that Professor Mills had not jailed MPP people for whatever reason. Of course, we know that Rawlings' background is not law. Professor Mills' background is law. Professor Mills took the view that on the basis of the law, it was going to be very difficult to jail person X or person Y. We can do political propaganda with the information, but in terms of the court processes, to establish the high standard of proof in criminal trial, it was going to be very complicated. So he was hesitating in going about this. He tried to do something with the Commission of Inquiry on the Ghana at 50, but that's about it. He couldn't really find much. JJ was not understanding. He was unrepentant about this. For this reason, he was making tales about Professor Mills in his public speaking. And he had gone to Tamale, and we all remember, those of us who remember, called Professor Mills Adom-Otchere man and all kinds of things. He didn't quite directly insult him, but you could tell that he was making fun of the president, his predecessor. In Kwamena Ahwoi's book, he tells us the story about how all of these things turned out. In fact, we learned, and I learned from Kwamena Ahwoi's book last night, that Professor Mills actually had written a resignation to resign as president of Ghana. Can you imagine what that would have been? That was in 2010. John Mahama would have been president in 2010. And John Mahama would have been president until 2012. And he would have contested elections again. If Mills had left the seat unceremoniously, something would have happened. To that extent, we have to praise the names that you will see in the story for holding Mills down and insisting that Mills doesn't resign and developing a strategy that will help Mills not to resign. But what did that strategy do for the rest of Ghanaian political discourse is what we are worried about. We're going to discuss it. So this is a beautiful story which is told in this book, Working with Rawlings, Kwamena Ahwoi. What page is it? Okay, we'll get the page for you very quickly. We'll get the page for you. But here is the story. On Friday evening after the Tamale Congress, President Mills called me on the phone. I was attending an IEA-sponsored workshop at Eburi in the Eastern region. President Mills asked me whether I had heard the things that Rawlings had said about him to the smaller group of NDC loyalists that he had met in Tamale after the Congress. When I replied in the negative, he said, quote, Kwamena, then try and get the audio and listen to it. I have been humiliated enough. I can't take it anymore. So I have decided to resign as president. Wow, this is heavy. This is heavy. This is heavy. Let's move on. It goes on. I have already started packing my things. Don't try to talk me out of it because my mind is made up. I am only telling you out of respect because you, Kwamena, were the one who got me into this in the first place. Now, I'm reading this part with emphasis because we have a testimony for that. When Professor Mills says that Kwamena Ahwoi is the one who got him into this politics in the first place, there's a testimony for that. There's a video that Kwamena Ahwoi has given us indicating what Professor Mills is saying. So we'll show you that video in a minute. But this is Professor Mills talking. He says that you, Kwamena Ahwoi, you were the one who got me into this in the first place. So Kwamena is now speaking. The quotation has ended. Kwamena says, I panicked, but I responded in a calm tone. Quote, he said, please, Mr. President, I am sure if you didn't want me to talk you out of it, you would not have called me. I would have heard about your resignation on air. I believe you that you have decided to resign, but I am sure you are not sure you are doing the right thing. So you want a second opinion. Please let me consult with my gang and get back to you. I love this. I just love this. It's page what? I didn't see it. 210, page 210 of the book. Page 210 of the book. That's where it is. Working with Rawlings. Please get one. When I finish, I'll sell the book nicely. People need to buy the book for Kwamena Ahwoi. I have bought 7 copies. I want to buy another 7. But people need to buy the book. So, and when I wanted the copies, I called Mr. Ahwoi directly. He showed me where it is. Somewhere in Laboni. That's why I went for it. So you can call him. He's a very open guy. You can call Mr. Ahwoi that you want the book. Buy 40 copies. 200, 60. Joy FM, go and buy 500. City FM, buy. Metro, we're going to buy. Let's buy the book and let our people read it. Let's read it. Okay. All right, let me get back to the story. So he says his gang. This is the part I like. He said, please let me consult with my gang. Who is the gang? In the next paragraph, you see the names of some of the gang members. He left his brother Adom-Otchere out of the gang list. But the gang, we know them. He calls them gang. We call them Fanti Confederacy. Rawlings calls them, I don't know. I don't know what Rawlings calls them. But he says gang. We say Fanti Confederacy. Okay. So he said, let me consult with my gang and get back to you, unquote. And he writes that Professor Mills agreed. Okay, let's move on. Who is the gang? This is the gang. Oh, viewers, please listen. Immediately, I called Captain Kojo Chikata, gang number 1 member, and briefed him about my conversation with President Mills. We, that is Kwamena and Captain Chikata, agreed that we needed to meet with President Mills urgently and that I should rope in gang number 2, Kofi Totobi Quakye. Gang number 2, rope in Kofi Totobi Quakye into the meeting. After consulting with Totobi Quakye, I managed to get President Mills to agree to a meeting with the 3 of us on Sunday evening. Fantastic. This is where the story begins. Let's get it. Come Sunday evening, and we were at Castle around 6 p.m. as agreed. There was every sign that President Mills had indeed decided to resign. He had packed many of his belongings in suitcases and card boxes, and many others were strewn on the seats in the hall, ready for packing. Viewers, is that not a great story? So we are sitting in Accra. We didn't know on that Sunday that if nothing had happened, Monday would have had an announcement that Professor J.E.A. Mills, President of Ghana, has resigned his position as president as a result of abuse from Flight Lieutenant Rawlings. This is the story. This is what was going to break. What were we going to do as Ghanaians? What was Nana Akufo-Addo's response going to be? What was the Speaker of Parliament going to say? John Dramani Mahama would have been sworn in immediately as President of Ghana. He would have had to nominate another president. Professor Mills would have gone home as former President of Ghana. This is an interesting story. It is in a book. Okay, let's go on. Let's move on. We must have spent about 4 hours with President Mills. Fantastic. Congratulations to Kojo Chikata, Totobi Quakye, Kwamena Ahwoi, and whoever else was there whose names wasn't mentioned. And I know who I'm talking about, but the person's name was not mentioned, so you can't say it. But I know who it is. So congratulations to Kofi Totobi Quakye, Kwamena Ahwoi, Captain Chikata, and all the others who were there to support this cause to keep the president in office in spite of the abuse. Let's move on. We must have spent about 4 hours with President Mills. In the end, he agreed not to resign, and we agreed to take steps to ensure that Rawlings stopped his public humiliation of President Mills or reduced it significantly. Great. Now the detail. They say the devil is in the detail. This is the detail. The strategy we adopted to achieve this objective was simple enough. From our knowledge of President Rawlings, we knew that he could not stand being talked back by people he considered his subordinates. This must have been due to his military background, because in the military, the subordinates never talk back to his superior officer. I'm not so sure, from what I know about Rawlings, that this description of him is correct. I don't think Kwamena Ahwoi is right. It is true that in the military, you don't talk back at your bosses, and that Rawlings was a military man. But if you look at the characterization of J.J. Rawlings, he wasn't that kind of person. Everybody could talk to him. So I'm not so sure about this part. Because Rawlings was not that. I have dealt with Rawlings. Rawlings was not that kind of person. I've seen Rawlings in his office in the company of Tony Edo and Victor Smith. I've had conversations with him. I have photographs I can show you. He wasn't that kind of person. This assertion, anybody, especially the soldiers, the other ranks, the junior ranks who knew Rawlings, will challenge this assertion, because J.J. Rawlings was certainly not like that. He was not the kind of person that you cannot approach, or that you cannot talk to, or that you cannot argue with, or that you cannot engage with. He was not like that. I'm not sure. Yes, he was a military man, but I think I have to enter this caveat based on my own information about my relationship with Flight Lieutenant Rawlings. Not a great relationship, but about my knowledge of his work and what I heard about him growing up in Boamah camp, everything I heard about Rawlings. It doesn't represent this one. But anyway, let's move on. This must have been due to his military background, he says, because in the military, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's go. So what we decided was that anytime President Rawlings attacked or insulted President Mills publicly, one of the younger members of the party. He chose younger members of the party. Sorry, we have a typo in there. Those of you who are reading it meticulously, there's a typo there. Instead of younger, we wrote anger. One of the younger members of the party. Now, this is the problem. Why did Kwamena Ahwoi, Totobi Quakye, and Kojo Chikata decide that in their strategy to stop Rawlings, they have to use a younger member of the party? Totobi Quakye himself could have spoken back to Rawlings and said that we disagree with J.J. Rawlings. Atokwashi could have done that. They could have had Joyce Ayi to do that. They could have had Christina Mwaku-Noma to do that. They could have had Kwame Pepra to do that. Why did they want to use younger members? That's where the problem began. And that is why you have to fault Kwamena Ahwoi's strategy for delivering to Ghanaian political discourse something that is a complete anathema to the culture of the Ghanaian people, where young people are insulting people because of politics. We can't do that. And this is the culture that has now created radio and television programs where all they do is they are insulting. So much so that on Good Evening Ghana, one of our flyers, we had to say, Good Evening Ghana, no insults, no prejudice. We didn't need to say that. Why must the television program say that we don't insult people? Because the culture of decadence has come to Ghana. It is so bad, and it is because of Kwamena Ahwoi, Totobi Quakye, and Captain Chikata, who took a decision that Sunday that they were going to get younger members of the NDC to attack Flight Lieutenant Rawlings. Younger. But why? NDC has so many people. Gameli Podugbe is there. He could have spoken about Rawlings. Guzi Tano is there. He could have spoken about Rawlings. Mije Bano is there. They could have spoken about Rawlings. All the intelligent people, Alban Bagbin was around at the time. He could have spoken about Rawlings. Why did they think they had to use younger people? That was a bad decision. And it's a decision that we now have to spend so many years to reverse and to correct, because it has delivered to Ghanaian political discourse something that is an anathema to our culture, the disrespect for adults and the insulting language that people use on other people for the reason and the cause of politics. It is very, very wrong. Okay. So he says that they decided that they have the younger members of the party will take him on publicly. Not with insults, he says, but with logic. I think that here again, I'd like to get into the mind of Kwamena Ahwoi, the writer. He had to put these insults there because he was aware that people who read this were going to be critical of his decision and were going to be critical of his thought that birthed this culture. So he quickly put there not with insults, but it turned out that they were insulting. They were particularly insulting. I'll show you a photograph of the people who did that. They were particularly insulting. Okay, he says not with insults, but with logic. All right, he continues. It worked, and the strategy proved effective. Rawlings toned down on his public criticisms of President Mills. Instead, he turned his anger on the young boys and girls who were talking back at him whenever he criticized President Mills publicly. He described them at a public rally as babies with sharp teeth. The name stuck, but the presidency of Professor Mills was saved. Which one should we pick? Kwamena Ahwoi set out to save Professor Mills's presidency, for which we congratulate him, because it would have been a disaster for all of Ghana. It's not about NDC. It would be a disaster for all of Ghana that your president says, I'm resigning because Rawlings is attacking me. But when I looked at it, I wondered, maybe that those days are different. You see, viewers, I think you get what I'm saying. Today, if Professor Mills says he's resigning because Rawlings is insulting him, everybody will laugh at him. But it's symptomatic of the culture of the day that Professor Mills felt that this insult is too much, I have to leave, because our culture is not like that. Today, the culture has been so polluted that if people are insulting people and you say you want to resign because they are insulting you, everybody will laugh at you. It's symptomatic of the Ghanaian culture of the day that Professor Mills felt that for Rawlings calling him an Adom-Otchere man in the grand narrative, it was enough for him to resign, that Rawlings was harassing him. That is how, because the culture there was not about that. You don't even make jokes about people in authority like that. You can tell them that they've done something wrong. You can criticize their policy, but you don't even do that. So I was listening to this narrative in my own head, and I said, but Rawlings too said, me, I've been talking Kwasi Asem, Adom-Otchere, Okam Kwasi Asem. I couldn't be bothered. We came back here on this program not to respond to Rawlings, but what did we do? When the video is there, we actually came to apologize to Rawlings. When Rawlings spoke about Good Evening Ghana and my person at a public June 4th rally and said that I'm a small boy and I've been talking in Kwasi Asem, as he put it, we came back on the show for who he is. We said we are sorry, but we stand by the position that it was his government that destroyed Ghanaian businesses. This is what I said, and he was upset that it was JJ's government that destroyed Ghanaian businesses. He was unhappy with it. And then he went to the podium and said that they should come and ask what those people were doing, why their business was destroyed. And that small boy, okay, Kwasi, said, fair enough. We came here, we said, JJ, we are sorry, but we stand by the position because the data and the record will show that it was your government that exited Ghanaian businesses from doing their work. So you don't tell people, young people, to insult Rawlings. That's what Kwamena Ahwoi, Totobi Quakye, Captain Chikata, that's what they did. And they are responsible for polluting the political discourse of this country. Journalists should be analyzing this and discussing where we are coming from. NCC, this is where we are coming from. Catherine, this is where we are coming from. We are coming from the thought processes produced by intelligent minds. Kwamena Ahwoi, Totobi Quakye, Kojo Chikata, very intelligent minds. And on that Sunday, God did not help Ghana. They decided to take a decision that has ruined our political discourse. This is how leaders can ruin your discourse. And that is why choosing leaders is not a matter of a joke. And that is why choosing leaders is not out of anger and hunger. No, choosing leaders is a choice for the future. Choosing leaders is not a choice about satisfying my ego and satisfying my emotion. You can do that if you want. But if you don't choose leaders for the future, it will come back to bite you. There's no escaping in that. It's like the Bible verse that says that, do not be deceived, for whatever a man soweth, that is what he will reap. That scripture starts with, do not be deceived, because it knows that many will be deceived that you can sow blue and raise red. You can sow white. No, the Bible says, do not be deceived, that whatever a man soweth, that is what he will reap. So you see, the choice of political leaders is not a choice about my emotion. Yes, we all are emotional. We all do that. We are all given to doing that. I am given to doing that, voting according to my emotion. But we must always remember that a choice of election is a choice for the future of yourself and your family, your country, your company, your corporation, all of that. That's the choice that we are making. Now, this is what has happened. 3 people, intelligent leaders, Kwamena Ahwoi, Totobi Quakye, Captain Kojo Chikata, decided to make a decision that young boys, small boys, I apologize for the word, small boys should go and insult Rawlings, and that has now seeped into our culture. This is what we have.